Greetings from Concordia Lutheran Church here in Greenwood, Indiana. I'm Pastor Paul Gashler. This is Sarah Shaddy, our Director of Christian Education. We're doing a virtual book fair, but it might just be better to say we want to talk to you about some books that we've found lately and are very excited about and would like to share with you. For this first video, we'll kind of focus more on books for adults, but we'll have some other videos to come with stuff focused on children. So the first book I want to bring out is this great title, Why Should I Trust the Bible? What a great question for Christians to answer, written by one of our Lutheran pastors. And he goes through a lot of the typical critiques that Christians face regarding our scriptures, the historical questions. Is it accurate? Has it been tweaked? Has it been messed with? And he goes through a lot of the typical questions you face, and he actually compares it to other historical documents. He gives you examples like from Shakespeare, or even something like the Gettysburg Address, how there's often multiple copies of these historical documents, but we have no problem accepting those other historical documents. Likewise, there are a lot of reasons that we absolutely should trust the Bible.
There's another book written by a man named Lee Strobel. He was an atheist who set out to prove why Jesus was a hoax and not who he says he is, that he's God. And as he started studying, he realized that Jesus is exactly who he claims to be. And this is the first one I read. It's called The Case for Christ, the Student Edition. It's a super quick, short read. There's some nice pictures and other things. He actually goes through and talks about documents as well. And there is a illustration in here that explains the Bible and how many original copies of that verse or original sources of that they have. And it's actually part of a series. There's also the adult version as well, and it's a lot thicker, a lot harder to read. Personally, I would rather read this one. And he's written other ones like Case for Faith, which also has a student edition, and Case for the Creator as well. So these are all really nice resources, and it's a different perspective that he's coming from as well. And going along with all of these science questions, Answers in Genesis, they have a series of answers books, and these books go through a lot of different science questions, things that I don't necessarily know about, and if somebody asks me, I'm going to go read it in this book and sum it up. Yeah. So they have these adult ones, they have a couple ones for teens, and some of these actually address the Bible question as well. They also have a smaller one for kids.
Awesome. So it's sort of changing directions now. This is kind of a striking title. Toxic Charity, How Churches and Charities Hurt Those They Help, but How to Reverse It. It gets at this question that, as the church, what do? We serve others, whether it be in giving money, giving time. But what this book helps address is so often we don't always do a great job following up with where we send our money or where we send our short-term help. And so it's often sometimes can lead to enabling people to then, further hurt themselves or further, put themselves in a bad situation. So what does this book emphasize? But how we should be very intentional when we help others, that we should build relationships. It gives the great example constantly, I believe, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, but teach a man how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. It takes those long-term relationships. It takes that hard work. And so it's a wonderful book for anyone to read if they're considering how they can help and serve others.
And speaking of serving others, this is a book I read within the past year or two, and I love this book. So I read Sticky Faith, which was the first one that came out that talks about how to help encourage your children and have their faith stay with them into adulthood. And then they wrote this more practical one for families, and there are just tons of ideas based on the research interviews that they did of what these different parents did in their households. And one of the chapters actually talks about serving together. There are other chapters that talk about reading the Bible together and doing devotions, and there are just hundreds of ideas on things to do together as a family in these books. And they do warn you that going through, there are lots of ideas, but just to pick one or two to maybe start doing as a family.
Wonderful. And so then as we consider family, we have a respective book for men and then for women. So The book for men is simply Man Up, sort of a cheesy title, but written by a great Lutheran pastor, the quest for biblical masculinity. And what does the book do? It actually takes you through a wonderful summary of Christian doctrine. It shows how, the understanding of man and woman is central to who we are as Christians and what do we believe about the scriptures. Ultimately, it points us to Jesus Christ as being the man who fulfills what being a man should be. And so he even admits right away, men, this book's going to make you feel bad. It's going to show you how you fail. It's going to point you to Jesus. But have no fear, it does have a practical section in the back of ideas and things you can do. But again, ultimately, it points you towards Jesus Christ. That's the best thing you can do, is put your focus on him and lead your family accordingly.
And even as mothers, we can do that as well. This is a book that I heard about last year, and I actually read it within the past couple of weeks, and I love this Risen Motherhood book. It talks about essentially the same thing, that there are a lot of laws that we can apply to motherhood, and just even topics like feeding your children and what you should do with school, and ultimately why, looking at it through Christ, that we have some of those freedoms to make those choices. And it's very nice. They follow this pattern. I keep turning to regular pages, but so they talk about the fall, the creation, the fall, then Jesus redeeming everything, and then what they call the consummation, or living life in today. And it's just a really nice book, really nice format. And if you want, I have a full review on our church website. That's something you can always check for articles from Pastor or myself.
Absolutely.
And they also have a podcast if you would like to listen to it. And that's actually how I first started listening to these things.
Very good. And then to close, this final book I have is entitled Celebrating the Saints by Pastor Whedon, a wonderful teacher in our church body. And what it's about, it just walks through all the saints' days of the church year. Just literally goes through calendar order. And if you remember here at Concordia, I've been introducing more of the saints' days on Sundays. So to give an example, coming up this Sunday, January 24th, we have the festival of St. Timothy. And so you'll see here, it's just 2 pages here, all about this January 24th celebration we have coming up about St. Timothy, who he was, why is he a saint? Why do we celebrate him? But most importantly, when we celebrate the saints, how do they point us forward towards Christ? How do they remind us how God has worked through various people in various ways to accomplish his gospel in our Lord Jesus Christ? So that's the books we have today. We'll have a link below of where you can, with some brief descriptions, and where you can go to purchase these books. Thank you for joining us.